new video today showing Ukrainian forces pushing their offensive line further inside Russia, including blowing up a key bridge in Russia's Kursk region. This follows a similar attack on another bridge on Friday. This ongoing and surprise attack has left Russia struggling to shore up its very own territory. Authorities from both sides are urging civilians to evacuate the area around Kursk. And in the Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine, that is where Russian troops are now advancing on a key hub for the Ukrainian military. I want to speak now to William Taylor. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and vice president, Russia and Europe at the U.S. Institute of Peace. Ambassador, thanks so much for taking the time.
Jim, thanks for having me here.
So we're seeing in events of the last 24 to 48 hours both the advantages of this remarkable push inside Russia by Ukrainian forces, but also the risk, because it appears that Ukraine took forces away from other parts of the front, and now Russia might be taking advantage of that and pushing forward on that eastern front. Is this a zero-sum game for Ukrainians, or is it on balance a gain, what we're seeing here?
It's clearly a gain, Jim, in terms of the morale of the soldiers, the morale of the civilians, the morale of the government, and really the morale of the supporters for Ukraine. So that's clear gain. But you're right about the number of soldiers. Both sides, both the Russians and Ukrainians, have a constraint on the number of soldiers that they've got right now under arms. Both are trying to train more. Both know that they've got trouble on enlisting new soldiers. And so, yes, in order to defend themselves, the Russians are having to pull troops out of the line, but also trying to throw recruits, brand new recruits, conscripts that were not supposed to be in war, not supposed to be in combat, and they're throwing them in the line, trying to defend their own territory.
So when we look at Ukraine's broader goal here, they've certainly raised morale, that they have forced Russia to divert forces from the Eastern Front. Those are immediate gains. But in terms of their longer-term objective here, they've made clear they have no intention, like Russia has done inside Ukraine quite brazenly, which is to invade, occupy, and annex territory. No intention by Ukrainian forces to do that inside Russia. So what is the longer-term objective in your view?
Longer-term objective for the Ukrainians is to demonstrate to the Russians that they can't win. That to throw them back, throw the Russians back on their heels, demonstrate to President Putin that he cannot outlast the Ukrainians, he can't outlast the European support and really the American support. When he sees that, Putin will have to look for a way out, and that's what the Ukrainians are looking for.
Yeah. It truly is. I mean, we should not underestimate what a remarkable change this is in the last 13 days, because I don't know anybody I speak to regularly about the war who predicted this, and now you have Ukrainian forces blowing up Russian bridges inside Russian territory. Is there any sense, can we get any sense as to whether this has pierced the bubble of vulnerability? Not for Putin so much, but perhaps for the Russian public, who Putin promised he would keep the war at a distance for them.
He did. He did, and he's tried to do that, and this demonstrates the number of Russians that they've had to evacuate out of Kursk grows dramatically, and those people are making it clear. The mothers of soldiers who were suddenly thrown into this war with no training are also making it clear. So yes, it is coming home to the Russian people that this is a war that they started and that they're now feeling the effects.
What do you believe the U.S. view is of this offensive? Because it strikes me the U.S. might not have been quite aware of Ukrainian plans here and might have been surprised to some degree itself.
May have been surprised, but I have the feeling that they are pleased, that the administration is pleased with what's happening. They're pleased that the Ukrainians have shown the initiative, have demonstrated that they've got the capability, that they can use these weapons that we've provided very effectively, and have pushed back on the Russians. The Americans, we would like to see this war end too, and this initiative by the Ukrainians is, in most people's view, a step in that direction.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country's forces continue to make progress inside Russian territory, gaining a stronger foothold and reinforcing their positions in the Kursk region. They also say they destroyed a second bridge in the past few days using precision airstrikes, likely further disrupting Russia's supply lines. It's been nearly 2 weeks since the surprise incursion, and Ukrainian forces say they now control more than 1,000 square kilometers of territory in southwestern Russia. CNN's Claire Sebastian joins me now from London. Claire, we're hearing that the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, is traveling to Azerbaijan. Why is he visiting Baku at a time, it's the first time foreign forces has occupied Russian territory since World War II. What kind of message is he trying to send here?
Yeah, this fits a pattern, Ivan, that we've seen from President Putin really since the early days of this incursion, trying to gloss over certainly that historical significance of it. They call it a terror attack. He's been blaming the West, everything to try to avoid making it clear to the Russian people that they are essentially under attack. State media, by the way, also taking its cue from President Putin and lurching between sort of human interest stories about evacuees from the Kursk region and overtly blaming the West in the same way that President Putin does. You know, I think there's a risk here, obviously, for him. This, along with, of course, we saw that massive terror attack in Moscow in March, on top of the march on Moscow by Yevgeny Prigozhin a year or so ago. It does altogether reinforce the sense that that sort of promise of security that Putin made to the Russian people a quarter century ago is fading away somewhat, and certainly the sense is that they are even less safe after the start of this war. But he does not want that information to trickle down to the Russian people, hence continuing with business as usual, this diplomatic blitz. The visit to Azerbaijan is the second big international meeting that he has held since the start of this Kursk incursion, having met with Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, in Moscow last week. And it may very well not be the last even this week. So maybe an attempt at a distraction here. And of course, militarily, Russia is also trying to create the sense that it is not affected by what's happening in Kursk, continuing to push, of course, on the Eastern Front.
So you're saying that the Kremlin is trying to present business as usual. Meanwhile, we're hearing that the leader of a country with long-held military ties to Moscow, that's India, India's Narendra Modi, is planning to visit Ukraine. How is that going to go over in Moscow?
You know, I think it will be a major blow to Russia. This visit, if it materializes in the coming days or weeks from Modi to Ukraine, will be barely a month and a half after Modi, as you see there in those pictures, visited Putin in Moscow, sat round a table drinking tea with him at his dacha at Novogaryova, just outside the Russian capital. As you say, India is a crucial ally for Russia economically. Before the war, the biggest buyer of Russian weapons, now one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil. It has refused to condemn overtly the war in Ukraine, not signed on to UN resolutions or sanctions, but has similarly also tried to maintain ties with the West and has been more sort of critical recently, more overt in calls for a ceasefire and calls for dialogue to end the war in Ukraine. So I think this will be a critical test for India's ability to carry on sort of with that delicate balancing act. Will he risk upsetting Putin with this visit? And similarly, does he want to be seen, like we've seen to an extent with China, as a sort of global peace broker in this conflict? Ivan?
All right, and we're expecting to learn more about that possible visit in the hours ahead. Claire Sebastian, live from London, thank you very, very much.